No one ever imagines that love can have an expiration date. But that's exactly what happened to Rachel. She and Mark seemed like the perfect couple. Smiles in photos, plans for the future, and vows of eternal love. Until life, with its ups and downs, changed her body. And with it, his gaze changed too. Mark started to pull away, disguised as tiredness, silence, and empty stares, until one day he simply left. Without goodbye, without explanation, he only left a message. It's not like before anymore. Rachel, devastated, thought that was the end, but she still didn't know that abandonment would be the beginning of the biggest turning point in her life. And what comes next? Not even Mark himself could imagine. 1. The beginning of an inseparable love. Rachel wasn't the type of woman who believed in fairy tales, but when she met Mark, something in her changed. It wasn't a magical encounter on a rainy night, nor a slow-motion exchange of glances. It was simple, true, real. They met in a small coffee shop in the city center. Rachel, a newly graduated nurse, was waiting for the bus to her shift. Mark, a civil engineer, was reading a book while drinking his coffee. They shared the same table due to lack of space. And it was there, between hurried sips and shy conversations, that the connection began. As days passed, their meetings became frequent. Mark said Rachel had a laugh that disarmed any pain. She, in turn, was enchanted by the way he listened to her, as if everything she said mattered. In a few months, they were inseparable. Mark was kind, attentive, the type who'd text just to say he missed her. Rachel, after years of trying to protect herself from disappointments, finally let her guard down. She believed he was different, and at that moment, he truly seemed to be. Their relationship evolved quickly. Simple dinners, lazy Sundays watching series, future plans ranging from a house with a porch to 2 kids and a dog named Milo. They talked about everything, fears, traumas, dreams, and between conversations, Rachel began to imagine that maybe true love really did exist. 2 years later came the marriage proposal. Simple, just like them. A picnic in the park where they had their first kiss. Mark knelt with a modest ring and teary eyes. Rachel said yes before he even finished the sentence. The wedding was intimate. Close friends, family, white flowers, and lots of laughter. Rachel looked at him like someone finding home in another person. Mark, in turn, carried her in his arms like someone promising the world. And at that instant, she believed it was possible. After the honeymoon came the adjustments of living together. Bills, routine, small habits. But love remained the foundation. Even in arguments, there was respect. And in the silences, there was complicity. In time, they started talking about children. Rachel wanted to be a young mother, and Mark seemed excited about the idea. When she got pregnant for the first time, she cried tears of emotion. Mark did too. It was the beginning of a new phase, and she was sure he would be a wonderful father. During her pregnancy, Mark doted on her. Favorite food, foot massages, 1,000 photos of her growing belly. When their first baby was born, Rachel saw him cry like never before. Love was there, alive, tangible. 2 years later, their second child arrived. The family was complete, and Rachel felt fulfilled. Even tired, even with sleepless nights, even with messy hair and clothes stained with milk, she felt happy. But time, oh, time is treacherous. What was once partnership began to turn into demands. Hugs became hurried, words silence. And Rachel, without realizing it, began to lose herself, too busy being a mother, forgetting to be a woman. But in that beginning, in that first phase, everything seemed perfect. And that's what hurts the most, knowing that one day she was everything to him, and he everything to her. Little did Rachel know that the love that seemed inseparable had a hidden condition: don't change. And her world was about to change. Promises of eternity and a new phase. After their second child, Rachel and Mark seemed to live a dream straight out of a margarine commercial. A house with a garden, 2 healthy children, and smiles framed on social media. On the surface, everything was harmony. Inside, Rachel was already starting to feel the weight. Motherhood, though full of love, came with exhaustion. Entire days without proper sleep, rushed meals, hair tied in an improvised bun, and dark circles under her eyes that she tried to hide with makeup when there was time. Still, Rachel kept going strong. She was the type of woman who would do the impossible to keep everything running.
Mark at first seemed to cooperate. He helped change diapers, put the children to sleep, and even made breakfast occasionally. But over time, these actions became rare, and subtle comments began to appear. "Aren't you going back to the gym? Remember when you used to wear that blue dress? Maybe you need to take care of yourself a little more." Rachel listened. She said it was fine. But inside, every sentence felt like a blow. She knew she had gained weight. She knew she wasn't the same as 2 or 3 years ago. But could that erase the love they had built? Mark said he didn't mean any harm, that he just wanted the best for her, that he was worried about her health. But Rachel noticed his gaze, a gaze that, once full of admiration, now seemed to be searching for something else, something she no longer knew if she could offer. Even so, she tried hard. She tried to diet, between feedings. She watched workout videos at home when the children were asleep. She wore loose clothes to hide the curves that no longer fit the standards. But nothing seemed enough, and with each frustrated attempt, the pain grew. Still, Rachel held firm to the promises they had made, in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, in beauty and in changes. She believed in it. She wanted to believe. Mark, however, seemed distant. His cell phone became a constant companion. Dinners grew silent, kisses hurried, hugs cold. When Rachel tried to talk, he would change the subject. When she cried, he would say she was too sensitive. The new phase that should have brought them closer was pulling them apart, and Rachel began to feel alone within her own marriage. There was a night when she woke up to the children crying, and looking over, she saw the empty bed. Mark wasn't there, not in the room, nor in the living room. He only returned the next morning, saying he had gone to clear his head. She didn't want to argue. She was too tired, of her body, of her mind, of his absence. Even so, she clung to the idea that everything would pass, that it was just a difficult phase, that with love, everything works out. But what Rachel didn't know was that Mark had already made a choice, and it wasn't for her, nor for their children. It was for himself. Because for him, love couldn't withstand what the eyes judged, and promises of eternity had an expiration date. Rachel didn't know it yet, but abandonment was closer than she imagined. And it would be more cruel than any physical pain she had ever felt. 2 children and a new version of herself. Rachel always knew motherhood would change her life. She just didn't imagine how much it would change her. Her body, her mind, her way of seeing herself in the mirror. And not just that, but also the way the world, especially Mark, would come to see her. After her second delivery, Rachel had no time for herself, literally. A newborn demanding cuddles and constant feedings, a 2-year-old still learning to talk, dealing with tantrums and fears, diapers, cries, toys on the floor, and a routine that started before sunrise and only ended when the last yawn conquered exhaustion. While friends posted about trips and brunches, Rachel posted forced smiles, trying to show that everything was fine. Inside, she barely recognized herself. Her body carried marks, scars of the life she bore, extra pounds that wouldn't go away with dieting or guilt.
Her breasts were saggy, her belly had new folds, and that dress that used to be her favorite now barely fit over her hips. But at the same time, Rachel also carried something else: love. An immense love for her children, a total surrender. She knew no postpartum body should be a reason for shame. Still, it hurt. Not for her, but because of Mark's gaze. He no longer touched her with the same frequency. He no longer complimented her. He no longer asked how she was. The only question he asked from time to time was, "Don't you think it's time to get back to normal?" But what was normal? Rachel didn't want to go back to who she was before. She was more now. A mother of 2 children, a woman who gave everything for that family. She just wanted to be loved in the form she was now, with all her transformations. She tried to talk to Mark. She said she needed support, affection. She said she felt invisible. He listened impatiently, said she was playing the victim too much, and slept on the sofa that night. After that, conversations turned into silence, and silence into distance. Rachel began to feel like a piece of furniture in the house, useful, present, but forgotten. She took care of the children, the food, the laundry, the house, and even with so much effort, she felt constantly judged. If she took care of the children, it was because she let herself go. If she tried to take care of herself, she was called selfish. It was on an ordinary night, while bathing her youngest, that Rachel looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. For the first time in weeks, she truly looked. And there, tired, wet, with her hair haphazardly tied up, she whispered to herself, "I exist. I'm still me." It was a brief but profound moment. For the first time, she didn't blame herself. She felt proud of what her body had done, of what her mind had endured, of how much she loved. And also, for the first time, she felt a flicker of anger, not for having gained weight, but for having been reduced to it. She was still Rachel. She still had dreams. She was still a woman. But Mark no longer saw it. To him, she had become the mother of his children, and that was all. As if the woman he loved had disappeared, along with the thin body he used to compliment so much. Little did he know, that new version of Rachel would be much stronger, much more beautiful, much more alive, and when she truly woke up, there would be no more room for him. Cold glances and painful silences. The house that was once full of laughter now echoed with silence. Rachel started noticing the signs long before admitting it to herself. Subtle signs, almost imperceptible, but to a sensitive heart, they hurt like knives. Mark no longer looked into her eyes with tenderness. When she spoke, he responded with monosyllables. When she dressed up, rarely on days when courage appeared, he didn't even notice. But what hurt Rachel the most wasn't the indifference. It was his gaze. That gaze that one day made her feel beautiful even in sweats and tied-up hair. That passionate gaze that accompanied her on lazy mornings and late afternoons with the children in her lap. Now it was cold, almost impatient, as if she bothered him, as if her presence was a burden. Mark would come home and lock himself in the room. He spent hours on his phone, saying he was tired, that he needed some time to himself. Rachel tried to understand, tried to justify him. Maybe he's overwhelmed too, she thought. Maybe work is difficult. She invented excuses for him because she still refused to accept the truth. Mark wasn't there anymore, at least, not emotionally. Conversations became rare. Questions turned into automatic obligations. Did the boys eat dinner? Did you buy the milk? Is there a meeting tomorrow? Nothing beyond that. No, How was your day? Did you sleep well? Do you need help? It was like living with a stranger. Rachel even confronted him one night while washing dishes and holding back tears. "Mark, don't you love me anymore?"
He took a long time to answer. He looked at his phone, then at her. "Rachel, I just think things have changed, you know?" She understood, or at least pretended to understand. She swallowed her tears, dried her hand on the dish towel, went to see the boys sleeping, and in the silence of the room, she cried softly. Rachel began to feel invisible. There were nights when she tried to get close, lean on his shoulder, strike up a conversation, and received a "I'm tired" as a reply. There were days when she thought about leaving, but what about the children, and the house, and everything they had built? And there was also a fear of being too dramatic. After all, Mark didn't yell, he didn't cheat, at least not that she knew of. He just drifted away, day after day, like a balloon released into the sky, silently disappearing. The worst kind of pain, Rachel learned, isn't the kind that explodes. It's the kind that accumulates in small daily doses. An indifferent look here, a silence there, a cruel comment disguised as a joke, an absence that makes its presence felt even when the person is right beside you. On one of those sleepless nights, Rachel sat on the kitchen floor, a cup of tea in her hand. She looked around, toys scattered, dim light, the house in silence. And there, she whispered to herself, "I don't deserve this." But still, she tried a little more. Another smile, another special dinner, another attempt at conversation. Mark didn't even notice. He was too busy looking at a screen, searching outside the home for what he claimed he no longer found in her. And so, amidst cold glances and painful silences, Rachel began to understand that the love that once made her smile was dying before her eyes. And the worst part, she was being buried along with it. The cruelest goodbye. There was no argument, no shouting, no last hug. Mark's farewell was done in silence and by message. That morning, everything seemed normal, or at least the normal that routine had become. Rachel woke up first, as always. She made coffee, warmed the children's milk, organized her eldest's backpack. The only difference? Mark didn't come down for coffee. She went up to call him. The room was empty. The bed was made, the wardrobe ajar. On the nightstand, an envelope and his phone turned off. Rachel, for a second, didn't understand. She thought maybe he had left early for work. But when she opened the envelope and read those words, her world collapsed. "Rachel, I can't do this anymore. I tried, but you changed. I did too. We're not what we were anymore. I need to breathe. I need to find myself again. Take care of the children, Mark." There was no "forgive me." There was no "let's talk." There wasn't even a goodbye. There was only coldness, distance, and cowardice. Rachel fell to the floor. Her hands trembled. Her heart felt like it was outside her chest. The first reaction was denial. He'll come back, she thought. It's just a phase, a moment. But as the minutes passed, and he didn't answer messages, didn't pick up calls, reality imposed itself, cruelly. Mark had left her, with 2 small children, a house to take care of, bills to pay, and a shattered heart. All this because she gained weight, because real life hit, because she stopped being perfect. Rachel wasn't foolish. She knew the abandonment wasn't just about her body. It was about the lack of empathy, the absence of true love, because someone who loves doesn't leave like that. But that didn't lessen the pain. Quite the opposite. The first few days were a blur. Rachel took care of the children on autopilot.
She put a smile on her face, not to scare them. She answered questions with a, "Daddy had to travel." And at night, she collapsed into her pillow. She cried silently, so as not to wake them. She screamed inwardly, while outwardly she was strong. She felt shame. She felt anger. She felt guilt. Was it me? If I had lost weight, would he have stayed? And that question echoed like poison. But, little by little, Rachel began to realize a truth that hurt, but also liberated. Mark never truly loved her. He loved an idea, a body, a moment. And when real life arrived, with its challenges, transformations, scars, he chose to run away. The cruelest goodbye wasn't the message. It was the fact that, even before he physically left, he had already vanished a long time ago. What remained in Rachel wasn't just longing. It was a hole, an emptiness filled with questions, insecurities, and fear. Fear of not being able to cope, of never being loved again, of living alone with 2 children and a broken heart. But deep down, very deep down, something began to awaken. A spark, a whisper, a voice that said, "You will rise." It wasn't time yet. She needed to grieve. She needed to feel. She needed to rebuild herself. But that voice, however small, was there. And Rachel, even in pieces, began to understand. The pain of him leaving was also her chance to return to herself. And one day, she wouldn't just return. She would shine. The pain that turns into strength. The house was silent. The kind of silence that doesn't bring peace, but weighs heavily. A silence full of absence, full of questions that were never answered. It was in this mute sound that Rachel lived every day since Mark left. The first week was like crossing a desert without knowing where the ground was. Rachel cried, hidden in the bathroom, between one feeding and another. She slept on the sofa with the youngest in her arms and the other child clinging to her neck. Sometimes she woke up not knowing if it was day or night, but time, that which hurts, also heals. After so many days living on autopilot, something inside her began to change. It wasn't a sudden turnaround. There wasn't a "enough" scream to the world. It was something subtle, almost imperceptible. It was when she was putting the children to sleep, and the eldest, with an innocent voice, asked, "Mommy, are you sad forever?" Rachel froze. Her heart turned cold, not because of what he asked, but because she knew the answer, and the answer was, no. She didn't want to be sad forever. She didn't want to be remembered by her children as a faded, tired, dull woman. She wanted to be strong, for them, and for herself too. That night, after the children were asleep, Rachel sat on the bed and looked in the mirror, the same mirror she had avoided for weeks, and, with swollen eyes and a torn soul, she made a promise. "I will no longer beg for love, not from Mark, not from anyone." The next day, something changed. Rachel woke up and styled her hair, not because she had to, but because she wanted to look at herself again. She picked out a nice outfit, even if it was just to take the kids to school. She walked to the bakery and, for the first time in a long time, smiled back at the attendant. Small attitudes, small gestures, small victories, but together, they began to rebuild who she was. Rachel started taking care of herself, not as a chore, but as a rescue. She resumed her habit of reading, wrote everything she felt in a notebook, looked for motivational videos online. She found an online group of single mothers and there discovered she wasn't alone. One night, while looking at old wedding photos, she didn't cry. She just looked, like someone seeing a closed chapter. Because that's what it was. Mark was now part of the past, and she wanted to write a new future. Rachel started exercising at home, even with the children jumping around. She cooked more carefully, not to lose weight, but to nourish herself. Gradually, the pounds came off, But that wasn't what made the difference. What was truly returning was the sparkle in her eyes.
The pain still existed, the longing too. But now they were accompanied by strength, a strength she didn't even know she had, and which deep down had always been there, hidden under layers of guilt, abandonment, and silence. Rachel didn't want revenge. She didn't want to prove anything to Mark. She just wanted to find herself again. And that's exactly what she was doing. Step by step, fall after fall, tear after tear. She was coming back. And when she was finally whole again, the whole world would notice. The rediscovery of an incredible woman. Rachel didn't know exactly when she began to realize she was changing. Perhaps it was on an ordinary morning, looking at herself in the mirror and finally seeing someone she recognized. A strong, determined, and vibrant woman. Not the Rachel from before, nor the one Mark had abandoned, but a new Rachel, truer and braver. The steps she took were small but firm. After the difficult months, she returned to the job she loved, nursing, that profession that had always been her passion and that, for a long time, she had set aside to take care of her home and children. Going back to the hospital wasn't easy, especially after so much time away. But every shift, every patient, reminded her of who she was beyond labels and pain. In the single mothers group she found online, Rachel made friendships that strengthened her. Women who had gone through similar stories, who inspired her and learned from her too. Together they laughed, cried, and celebrated every small achievement, as if it were a giant victory. And her self-esteem, that old friend she thought she had lost, began to reappear. Rachel started taking care of her body again, not to please anyone, but because she finally realized the value of feeling good about herself. The weight gradually disappeared, but what truly changed was the light in her eyes. She began to smile without fear, to look people in the eyes with confidence. That sparkle was the result of a journey of self-discovery and acceptance that only she could make. And most importantly, Rachel learned that true love begins within herself, and that no one, absolutely no one, can take that away from her. Her reunion with herself also brought a new outlook on the future. Rachel began to plan dreams that once seemed distant, a trip with the children, specialized courses in her career, even the idea of a new relationship, but only when she was ready.
And it was on one of those mornings, while drinking coffee on the porch, that Rachel realized something she didn't expect. Peace. Not that empty peace of someone who gave up, but the peace of someone who fought, fell, got up, and chose to be happy even with the scars. Mark, the man who left her at her worst moment, was now just a memory. A difficult chapter, but necessary for her to write her own story. Rachel held no anger, no resentment. She had something much greater: gratitude. Gratitude for the strength she discovered, for the love she found within herself, and for the children who made her even more complete. And deep down, she knew that no one could erase what was truly hers. The courage to be who she always was, and the determination to never let herself be extinguished again. The day everything changed again. Years had passed since Mark disappeared from Rachel's life. Years in which she faced storms, stumbles, and achievements no one could have imagined. Her children grew up, her smile shone again, and the woman who was once left behind transformed into a beacon of strength and inspiration. On that ordinary morning, Rachel was at the park with her children, enjoying the mild sun and the laughter that filled the air. Small hands gripped hers as they ran, jumped, and played without a care. An image of simple yet profound happiness. That's when he appeared. Mark, the same man who had left her years before, now standing on the other side of the park, watching her from a distance. The gaze Rachel knew so well was there, mixed with surprise and perhaps regret. She felt her heart quicken, but not out of fear. It was a mix of emotions she was still trying to understand. Was he there to ask for forgiveness? To explain what he never had the courage to say? Or just to observe, like someone trying to win back something they lost? But Rachel was no longer the insecure woman who cried in the dark of the kitchen. She was the woman who learned to love herself, who discovered she was capable and independent, the woman who didn't need approval to exist. Mark approached, hesitant. He tried to strike up a conversation, spoke of longing and regrets, mentioned past changes and mistakes. Rachel listened, but deep down his words seemed empty, as if trying to fill a void she had already filled on her own. She looked at him and saw the man who abandoned her in the worst phase of her life, the man who couldn't appreciate true love, the man who chose to run away in the face of difficulties.
And, at that moment, Rachel made a decision. Not out of pride or resentment, but out of self-love. She smiled, thanked him for the unexpected visit, and said she was happy. Happy to be alive, happy to have overcome the pain, happy to be the master of her own destiny. Mark, visibly shaken, tried to insist, but Rachel gently pulled away. There was no room for him in that chapter of her life. She was writing a new story, a story of strength, courage, and true love. As she walked with her children, Rachel felt a peace she never imagined she could achieve. She knew that the past was a part of her, but it didn't define her. She was more than a woman who was left behind. She was a woman who rose, shone, and moved forward. And the best part? This was just the first of many turning points yet to come. The request that came too late. After that unexpected encounter in the park, Rachel didn't expect to hear from Mark again. She returned to her routine, taking care of her children, working and living her new life with the strength she had gained. However, a few weeks later, the phone rang. It was Mark. His voice sounded hesitant, laden with regret. He said he had made a huge mistake, that he missed his family, that he wanted to try to start over. He asked for a chance, pleaded for her to listen to what he had to say. Rachel listened calmly. Inside, a mix of feelings flooded her, a pang of pain, a hint of bitterness, but also an immense certainty that she was no longer the same person he had left behind. She replied serenely, "Mark, what you feel is legitimate, but we can't go back to what we were. I lost myself trying to please you, and now I've found myself. I won't erase everything I've lived through alone." He insisted, talking about mistakes, promises, and plans to change. He wanted to go to couples therapy to show that he had matured, that his love had never disappeared, only hidden behind his flaws. Rachel, however, had already traveled a long path of self-discovery. She knew that, for her, love isn't measured by words or belated regrets, but by actions that truly transform. And she couldn't rebuild a bridge that he himself had destroyed. Furthermore, she needed to be an example for her children, to show that respect and self-love are non-negotiable, that it's not enough to promise changes, one must live them. With a heavy heart, Rachel told Mark that her decision was to move forward, that she had chosen to be happy and complete without depending on him, that the door to the past was closed, but that she wished him learning and peace.
The conversation ended with a heavy silence, but also with an internal peace for Rachel. She knew she had done what was right for her and for her children. Mark at that moment realized he had lost much more than a wife. He had lost a warrior, a mother, and a soul who learned to value herself.
The request to return came too late, because Rachel now was the owner of her own story, and she had a beautiful path to walk, far from the past that almost consumed her. Rachel always knew life would be full of challenges, but she never imagined that the greatest one would be to love herself after so much abandonment. In the beginning, the pain seemed unbearable, a storm threatening to swallow everything she was. But step by step, tear by tear, she discovered a powerful truth. To be truly happy, she first had to choose herself. She chose herself. She chose not to let Mark's rejection define her worth. She chose to honor her journey as a mother, woman, and warrior. She chose to take care of her body, her mind, and above all, her heart. Rachel learned to say no to everything that didn't nourish her soul, the criticisms, the judgmental glances, the internal doubt that insisted on returning. And by saying yes to herself, she discovered the freedom she had sought for so long. Her children grew up seeing a mother who, despite falling, rose with courage. A woman who didn't let the abandonment of the past prevent her from dreaming, smiling, and loving again. Perhaps a different, lighter, and truer love, but above all, self-love. The house that once echoed painful silences was now filled with sincere laughter, plans, and achievements. Rachel had built not only a new life, but a new story, a story of overcoming hope and transformation. She knew that what she suffered would never be forgotten, but she no longer needed to carry that weight. Because what truly mattered was what she did with it all, using the pain as fuel to reinvent herself. Today, Rachel is not just the woman Mark left behind. She is the woman who found herself, healed herself, and chose to be happy. And that choice, to love herself, respect herself, and value herself, is the greatest act of courage there is. She turned the page, and in the book of life, she wrote the most beautiful chapter, that of the woman who, above all, chose herself first.
This story isn't just about Rachel. It's about all the women who have been made to feel invisible, judged or replaced because they changed, because they matured, because they brought life into the world. Let this story serve as a reminder. True love doesn't abandon. It doesn't demand perfection. And if someone leaves you at the moment you need them most, may you have the courage to do what Rachel did. Choose yourself. If this story touched you in any way, please share it. Someone might need to hear exactly this today. And if you want more inspiring stories like this, you know what to do. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. See you next time.